All right, welcome everybody to another edition of Opposition Wednesday. We'll try to get a little bit closer to the Broncos to do that this week. And welcome back, Benjamin Allbright, to the show. Benjamin, how you been, bud?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Doing good. Last time we talked, you nailed Gannon. You nailed off Monken to the Ravens. You had Payton, which I'm not sure you necessarily wanted out in Denver, but you had that right. And of course, you made big news in Commanders land when you called EB well before anybody was talking about it. What is coming next?
The apocalypse, right? No.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I think we're into coach firing season, aren't we? Who's on the hot seat? I think that's probably where we're at with this. With it currently, I would suggest that Brandon Staley's seat is red hot. So I would kind of keep an eye on that one. I think we're a few weeks away, but that Chicago Bears offensive coordinator job might get a little warm. I think they'll make a coordinator before they pull the plug on Fields, and I'm not a Justin Fields fan. I don't think he's very good. I think he's very slow to process the field. I think he's a phenomenal athlete and was a great college quarterback, but I think the speed of the game so far has just been too fast for him, and he just doesn't process quick enough. So we'll see. But I do think Luke Getsy is a bit on the hot seat, and there's going to be a surprise at some point, person that just keeps losing that'll be on there. I think Todd Bowles isn't on the hot seat, but is coaching for his job. I know that may be counterintuitive. And then your own Ron Rivera, I think everybody knows Riverboat Ron's a little on the warm seat.
Feels like new ownership's going to give him the year no matter what, don't you think?
Yeah, he's one of those guys. Like, there are certain guys that you just don't fire in the season. They've earned they've been around the game long enough that they've earned the respect and the credibility to be able to finish a season. And Ron is one of those guys.
Do you think I know you called Gannon to the Cardinals. Do you think that will last? What do you think ends up happening with Kyler Murray and the whole thing there?
Well, John Gannon's going to be the head coach there beyond this season. They knew, he and Monty Ossenfort knew from the get-go when they were taking that job that it was going to be a sand it down full rebuild from the get-go. I think they feel like they've got more pieces than maybe the public at large, but there's still some things that they have to do, and they know they're going to do, and they know they're going to lose this year, and they know they're going to have good draft picks from the Texans and themselves. He's going to be the head coach beyond this year, and I do think it'll work. I think he's a very smart guy, and I think that some of the video clips that get put out there are a bit disingenuous because they edit for effect, that kind of stuff. But he's a smart guy. And he knows football, and he wouldn't be where he was if he didn't. As far as Kyler Murray, maybe he plays this year, but my gut is he's played this last down as an Arizona Cardinals. He definitely won't be back there next year. So that's kind of where that's at. And I don't even know if he'll be in football at that point. He might be a guy that moves back to baseball when the contracts are guaranteed, and he kind of take a little less off the body, that kind of thing. So there's, there are opportunities for Kyler Murray, but I don't think he'll be back in Arizona beyond this year.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe when we chatted last time that it wasn't that you didn't like Payton, but maybe that you thought he was overhyped a bit as a head coach. How have you found him to be since he's been in town? And have you caught a lot of grief for saying that?
I catch a lot of grief for a lot of things I say. I think people think it's personal for me. It's not necessarily personal for me. And if I'm wrong on something, I'm happy to be wrong on something. Like, I'm not one of those people that's mad that I get, that I'm wrong on something. I don't know that I'm wrong on Sean Payton, though. I think the legend of Sean Payton outpaces the production of Sean Payton. You go back and you look at the year that he was suspended, and then what preceded that, and the offense had almost no drop off when he wasn't even there. Now, could that be that he put such a great system in place that there wasn't any? Who knows? But when he came back, the offense didn't pick up. I think they scored fewer points actually when he came back. As far as the rest of it goes, you got one Super Bowl with Drew Brees. And Drew Brees is arguably a top 5 all-time NFL quarterback. And it wasn't like Drew Brees was somebody else before he got to Sean Payton. That's a popular misnomer. You go back and look, and on a per-throw basis, he was just as good at the Chargers. They just didn't let him throw very much in a Marty Schottenheimer offense. So he, obviously he wasn't throwing for 5,000, but if he'd gotten the attempts, he would have easily cleared 5,000 yards. there with the Chargers. So I think the idea of Sean Payton, who, by the way, I think is a good coach, like me saying those things doesn't make him a bad coach. I think he's a good coach. I just don't think he's a great coach. I think, like, for instance, Mike McCarthy, I think is a good coach. I just don't think he's a great coach. One Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, again, another guy who's arguably a top five, quarterback. That tells me something. So I think that end of the day, Sean Payton will have the Denver Broncos playing good football. Does he take them to a Super Bowl? I don't know.
So last year was a weird year for the Broncos. Hackett out, Payton in. How's it made a difference for the quarterback? Because the quarterback did not look good last year. Was that the quarterback? Was that the system? Are we overstressing the year that he had last year? And how do you think he looks so far this year?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it was the coaching staff let Russ have too much power, and he did things that he isn't good at. I think part of it was the scheme and not properly coaching him up. I think part of it was Russ put on a bunch of weight and tried to transition himself to become a player that he's not. Russ wanted to become Drew Brees, and he's not Drew Brees. Like, he's just not. Russell Wilson has been a great quarterback because he can hang on to the football for 3+ seconds, and then when everything breaks down, find the guy that's heading north and hit him with a deep shot, right? Drew Brees was not that guy. Drew Brees was a guy who had careful precision and timing on in-breaking routes. Russ doesn't even like to throw in-breaking routes. And his accuracy in the short and intermediate game is nowhere close to Drew Brees. So, and then his legs made him part of what he was. So I think taking the weight off and getting back to playing at like 215 pounds, I think that'll help Russ. I think Russ needs to get back to being Russell Wilson and understanding and identifying the things that make him great in that regard and just being great at those things. And I don't know that we're ever going to see 2020 Russell Wilson again, but I do think that he can play and have better production than he had last year.
I watched the condensed version this morning before we got going of the Raiders-Broncos game. It felt like the scheme worked. It looked like guys were open. The running game seemed to be okay. What were some of your thoughts after you rewatched the game that maybe you missed the first go-round?
Well, they just didn't take enough deep shots. I mean, they had Philip Dorsett out there. They got a big flag off that right off the bat, and they just never went back to it. I don't think they used Cortland Sutton enough. The run game looks good. The run game does look good. I don't think there's any gripes there whatsoever. He tried this bizarre quick screen to the running backs, a couple of them that's short. It doesn't go out. It comes back in. Like, the screen comes back in towards the line of scrimmage, and it never looked right. So they need to dump that play. But it felt like that they neutered Russell Wilson in a lot of ways. I mean, he threw the ball 31 times, but and completed an astounding percentage of it, like something like 27 of them. But he only had 170, 77 yards. It was all short stuff, just dink and dunk. And I get it, getting your quarterback in a rhythm, but perhaps they were a little too concerned with the rhythm and not concerned enough with pushing the ball down the field and scoring points.
Tell me about the kicking game.
It was bad. We might have to call him Will Utz because he handed the Broncos the L in his last name. I don't get me wrong. I like Will Utz. He's a fun guy, but he's been a declining kicker for basically 5 years. And he was a guy that kicked in a dome. And Sean Payton, went through 3 or 4, got rid of Brandon McManus, went through 3 or 4 other kickers, and then traded to bring his guy in. And then, he missed a field goal and missed an extra point, and that was the difference in the game. The extra point was the difference in the game. The field goal would have been the winning field goal. And so that's sort of a problem. I mean, I think Sean Payton is loyal to his guys to a fault, so he's going to give him more chances. But that's something that was certainly eye-opening because Sean Payton has his thumb all over this team. Like, all these decisions are his, and then George Payton has just kind of taken more of a scouting and advisory role, kind of thing, rather than being I think a true general manager. And so, you wind up looking at, this roster, this team, and saying, this is the brainchild of Sean Payton. Where are the points? And when you see a kicker that's struggling like that you traded draft picks for, that's kind of a head scratcher.
It's interesting. Not many guys are even interested in having that much control. Ron had it here when he first got here. They took it from him this year. Where do you stand on this idea of the head coach having that much control?
I think when you're winning, it's not an issue. I think if you're not winning, all of a sudden it becomes an issue. I don't, for me, I don't care much for the coaches that are so hyper controlling over everything. I understand having an attention to detail. I understand the vitality, the vital nature of that. I understand, especially in the game of football, which is a game of inches, that those details can make the difference between inches. Inches add up to feet, feet add up to yards, and yards lead to touchdowns, right? But making sure that every mug that's sitting on a desk has exactly 9 pens in it is absurd.
Yeah. Okay.
Restricting access by media by the way that they have, just because Sean Payton likes to troll media and media is the bad guy for everybody right now, is absurd. We're just trying to do a job, and so that's a little annoying. But I mean, if that's the way you want to run things, cool. I mean, if you're able to pull that off, okay. Some people aren't able to pull it off. Josh McDaniels has that level of absurd control, and it doesn't really work for him very often. Um, I'll say that, I think the idea of controlling all the media stuff and you can't show pictures of this or any of that kind of stuff is stupid. I mean, Kansas City had open streaming cameras during their training camp. They're the Super Bowl champs. Like, they don't care. And I don't think that's something that, I don't think that's the difference between winning and losing. So if that's how you want to run your team, cool. I just don't think it endears you to anyone.
Sam Howell mentioned this will be his first time out in Denver. I was wondering if you could kind of, I know you're not out there playing, but I wonder if you could kind of put into perspective what it's like to go out there in that altitude for the first time.
It's tough. I mean, I moved out here 10, 11 years ago, and I moved out here from Tampa, and it was tough. I mean, I lived at the time I came out here. I rented an apartment for 6 months, and I lived on the third floor. And walking up 3 flights of stairs, I was a pretty in shape guy. Walking up 3 flights of stairs was a problem. You were like, oh, I noticed that. And so, I'll tell you, if you're not prepared for it, it'll take it out of you. It can make you a little bit queasy if you're not used to it, kind of thing. Just a general feeling of like slight queasiness, but you get over that fairly quickly. But it'll take it out of you. And I'm gonna tell you, if you're not watching yourself, you'll be in that fourth quarter, you'll be gassed.
Yeah, it was interesting. He mentioned Sam did in his press conference for practice today that the nutritionists had some things that they were going to be doing with them. Do you have any idea what that might be? Like what they can do to kind of help?
Oh, making sure fluids. It's so dry and the air's so thin that you'll get dehydrated a little quicker, and you won't realize it either. So that's one of those things as well. I think you want to make sure that you've got plenty of fluids and salts in you and everything like that, so that you don't get dehydrated.
The fan base here is clamoring for Dalton Risner. He's still out there. Has he washed? I mean, there's a reason he's still out there, right?
A couple of things. I mean, there was a deal. I don't know if the deal was firmly in place, but there was kind of an agreement that it was heading towards anyway, that he was going to go out, I think, to the Falcons, and then they drafted Matt Bergeron, and that kind of fell apart. Minnesota has had him out once, and I think they're having him out again. They may be making that move. Dalton's a good dude. Like, I'll tell you a quick anecdote. For my radio show, we used to have this deal where we went out on Monday nights for Monday Night Football. And prior to that, we would have a player, an athlete out there who would sit for an hour and be on the air with us and all that kind of stuff and sign autographs and that kind of thing. And Dalton is the first and only player I've ever seen as a rookie who, once his hour was up and he got his check, didn't bounce. Like, some of the guys will stick around and eat and then they'll leave, but most of them just leave, right? Dalton Risner went table to table and shook the hand of every single person that was there, every single person that came out, thanked them for coming out, asked them if they wanted pictures, autographs, everything, made sure everyone in that restaurant was taken care of before he left. And then he donated the check. And I'll just say that he's a supremely good person. That said, last year during Christmas in that game, he did get caught on camera shoving the backup quarterback who was over there telling the offensive line to pick Russ up after plays because they weren't doing it. And so, there was that clip is certainly well known around the league. And I will tell you that there are some people that don't want that on their team. And I think that was a moment of frustration because of a cratered season and a failure of leadership. But unfortunately, Dalton Risner is getting tagged with it as the poster boy for it, rather than, the guy who I think that he is at his core. So I'll say this: I think he's a good player. I think he's a great human being, and I think whatever team gets him and ultimately signs him will be doing themselves a favor.
It's about 2 o'clock on Wednesday, so I know it's a little early in the week. But what does the injury report kind of look like for the Broncos this week?
Well, most of the players that are hurt for the Broncos are done for the season. Guys like Jalen Virgil, Caden Stearns, who got hurt in the last game, people like that. Most of those guys are just, they're done for the year. Greg Dulcich is going to be out for probably about 6 weeks with a hamstring. I don't think the only shorter term injury or guy that'll be flirting with potentially playing will be Jerry Jeudy. I'm not sure he plays in this one. I would consider him questionable at this point. He was listed as questionable for the last game, but he was never going to play in it. This one, I think, they're kind of eyeballing to see if he'll play in it, and I think the target date is actually probably next week. But if he plays this week, so much the better. So there's really not a whole lot of injury. Everybody that's hurt is hurt long term, and everybody knows about it. Jerry Jeudy would be the one to keep your eye on.
What do you think? It's a 3.5-point favorite for the Broncos. What do they have to do to win this game, you think?
Score points. I know that sounds reductive, but score points. I mean, you can't go into a football game, have your defense hold your opponent to 17 and lose the game. You can't do it. And they've been doing it for years. That's the problem. That has been the price. The whole reason Sean Payton is here.
Sounds familiar.
Offensive genius, wonderkind. We're going to score points, and then you just don't. And to be fair, I mean, it should have been 20 because of the field goal and the extra point, but still, 20 points is not exactly putting on a scoring barrage either. They've got to learn how to score points, period. The protection was pretty good on the offensive line last week. It's just a question of coming away from drives with points. And when you only have 6 drives, I sort of get it because these were long, lengthy ball control drives. But at the end of the day, you can't have a 9-minute drive and come away with nothing. And they did. In order to win, you've got to basically circle 22 points. If you can get to 22 points with this defense, you're probably going to win 9 times out of 10.
Of course, the defense they'll be playing, that will be a tall task. The Commanders don't give up very many points on defense. They were great again on third down after having led the league last year on third down get-off rate. What does the offensive line look like? Because it's going to be their job, I think, to really kind of – if the Broncos win this game, it will be because of the offensive line, in my opinion. How do they fare against one of the better D-lines in the league?
Well, they did pretty good against Max Crosby this past week. Now, again, Crosby's one man, and the Raiders' line is not exactly a murderer's row beyond Crosby, but, they did pretty good against Max Crosby. Left to right, you've got Garrett Bowles, Ben Powers, Lloyd Cushenberry, Quinn Meinerz, and Mike McGlinchey. I think the guards are the strength of this team, Ben Powers and Quinn Meinerz. Lloyd Cushenberry is a little if you bull rush him, that's kind of the key to beating him. He's a little on the strength side is where he's lacking. On the outside, Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey. I think they're good tackles. I don't think they're great tackles.
McGlinchey played right for San Francisco, right? So they've moved him to the left.
For the Broncos as well. Garrett Bowles is the left.
Oh, okay.
I think everybody knows. I mean, Bowles, and to be honest, there was a trade shopped to Washington for Garrett Bowles, by the way, this offseason, never materialized. But in terms of Garrett Bowles, I mean, Garrett's he's a great athlete. He's more athlete than football player. And you can frustrate him and get in his head, and that's kind of the key to beating him. McGlinchey, I think everybody knows, he's kind of a Nate Soldier clone, played well in that, for Kyle Shanahan. Not the world's greatest pass protector, but pretty good in the run game. I think, like I said, I think that the guards are really the strength of this offensive unit, and but it's different because you guys have a full defensive line full of good players. This is not like the Raiders where they got one guy and then 3, just kind of guys. So that's going to be a real test for this Broncos team. And Russ is at his best, like I said, when he can hold the football for 3 seconds and then find somebody who gets open. And the defense that they're up against is not really built, for that. They get after you pretty quick. So.
They do. They also implement 5 defensive backs most of the time. I'm assuming that the Broncos do something similar, as most teams have kind of shifted that way. Is Fabian Moreau on the other side? Is that right? Of a Washington favorite?
Yeah, he's definitely there. He's like the 6th corner, but he's there.
Okay. I don't know who plays opposite of Surtain then.
It's Damari Mathis, and he got absolutely worked by Jacoby Myers in that Raiders game. Mathis is a guy who started slow last year and then really turned it on after a disaster of a first game. So we're kind of hoping we get the same thing here. The slot corner, the nickel corner is Asang Bassi. He's played very well. The light bulb came on for him this year. He's on in place of Kwan Williams, who's more of a run fit guy. They like to really run, or what Vance Joseph wants to run is more of a heavy nickel, which is 3 safeties instead of the 3 corners.
Mm-hmm.
But with Payton Stearns going out with that season-ending injury, K-Jack will move back to a 2 high safety and not be that run fit guy down in the box that they had envisioned. So you will get some 3 safety looks, but it'll be a lot rarer than what you would normally have gotten if Caden Stearns had been healthy.
Commanders more and more have been using a 5-man front, which I like. If I wasn't mistaken, it looked like the Broncos did at least a bunch of times that I noticed. Is that something they've implemented this year?
No, they've been doing that for a while. I mean, that started with
Okay.
Vic Fangio. They used Mike Purcell at the nose. DJ Jones and Zach Allen will be the 2, air quotes, defensive ends, and then your edge rushers would be Randy Gregory and Jonathan Cooper, with Nick Benito rotating in as well. And they do that. They kind of do that kind of sort of 5-man front. That's something that started with Vic. And this defense is really, as much as Vance Joseph is running it, what Vance usually runs is a polar opposite of what Vic runs. Vic runs middle of the field open coverages with low pressure. I don't want to send anybody I don't have to at the quarterback. I'm dropping it back. And Vance Joseph comes from the Wade Phillips school, which is send everything in the kitchen sink and hope my secondary holds up. So but so they're still running things the way Vic ran it, using the same terminology and all that. Vance is going to have to get more aggressive though, because the unit got 0 sacks against the Raiders, and that offensive line was not very good.
Mm-hmm. What does that say about Randy Gregory? What's he been like since he's got there? In fact, I had totally forgot he was there till you mentioned him.
Randy last year was a high pressure guy. Might not have shown up in the sack totals, but when he was on the field, he was a high pressure guy. This year, that has yet to materialize. So we'll sort of see. Jonathan Cooper on the other side, a former 7th round pick who, has just kind of kept plugging away and gotten better and better. He's not some kind of all-world pass rusher, but he does set the edge well in the run game, and he will get after you a little bit. Nick Benito is more the pass rush specialist. And then they have Frank Clark there as well. But like I said, it's a bit of a rotation, and they're going to have to figure that out.
And who plays linebacker there? I'm assuming they use 2 most of the time.
Most of the time, Alex Singleton, who is the best of the 2, a highly athletic 360-degree linebacker, is fine going away from the ball, coming downhill sideline to sideline. And then Josie Jewell, who's more of a run fit guy, run funnel guy, sure tackler, but lacks the athletic profile. Behind both of those guys, they have Drew Sanders, who's a rookie out of Arkansas, 6'4", about 240, real fast guy. And I think he'll get worked into the rotation a little bit more. But right now, as a rookie, Vance is a little bit more reluctant to play him.
It's early, but do you have any idea what the weather's going to be like on Sunday?
It's supposed to be sunny and nice. I think sunny and 70 degrees. So, obviously low humidity out here, but it'll be perfect football weather.
Again, it's early, but what do you think the outcome of the game is on Sunday, or at least what kind of game do you think we're looking at?
I think you're going to see a ground and pound game probably from both these 2. I will tell you that offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy obviously knows Colorado very well, knows the weather out here. I'll have the guys prepared for that. I think if you're going to, if Washington is going to win, they're going to have to exploit the Damari Mathis matchup. Just stay away from Surtain. Just stay away from him. Go after Mathis and keep going after Mathis. And whichever one of those 3 receivers you have that are very good and gets on him, I think you just got to keep picking on that. You have to have enough of a ground game to keep the pressure off the quarterback. If the Broncos are going to win, it's probably on the ground. You're going to need big days out of Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine. And then the 3rd back who kind of plays that Darren Sproles role, Jaleel McLaughlin, you probably need him to pop one or have a big gain at some point. The Broncos pass game is going to be dink and dunk stuff, mostly slants, comebacks, out, shallow outs, things like that to the quarterback and tight ends. You're going to see the running backs catch a lot out of the backfield. They'll be the primary receivers for the Broncos. So you're going to, like I said, you're going to have to have a big day out of the running backs if the Broncos are going to win.
It's just amazing to me that Samaje Perine is still in the league, another former Redskin, but
he was the leading receiver last week, by the way.
Is that right? But he caught balls. They never did that in Washington. I don't know if it's just because they didn't throw it to him or what, but it feels like a million lifetimes ago that Samaje was here in Washington. What do you guys got going on the radio show this afternoon?
I think we're gonna have somebody from Pro Football Focus kind of sift through some of the Week 1 data and kind of look at that. We'll have Steve Atwater, the Hall of Famer, is going to join us in studio for an hour. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then we typically do our fantasy football segment on Wednesdays. We have Samantha Praviti, formerly of the Wall Street Journal, come in and do that.
I played against a guy this last weekend that had the Dallas Cowboys defense, and just to say, it was not great to see 42 stacked up on the defensive point side.
Well, I thought I had a great receiving core, but T. Higgins and Drake London combined to double donut me. So
I have the same guys on that team. I feel your pain. Benjamin, I always appreciate your time, man. It's always great to be able to do this a couple times a year with you, so I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right, man.